Hello, I'm Jake Boudreau, civic journalist at Tello Community Television. This week, on The Record, NDP leader reviews the fall sitting of the Nova Scotia Legislature. Local volunteers were honored at a provincial ceremony. Interim Liberal Leader looks back on the fall session. Former Game Warden who was killed in the line of duty to be remembered in Port Hawkesbury. And the Department of Natural Resources makes changes to provincial hunting regulations. But first, Port Hawkesbury Town Council held its monthly public meeting on October 7th. After the meeting, Deputy Mayor Ian Langley and CAO Terry Doyle fielded questions from the media. 2 bridges in Port Hawkesbury closed on October 9th and will remain closed for some time. Public Works Director Jason McMillan gave a presentation on the 2-lane bridge and Timber Bridge, both at the intersection of Reeves and Granville Streets. On October 3rd, Town Council held an emergency meeting after a recent inspection by bridge engineers noted significant deterioration, the town said in a public notice issued last week. McMillan said the town is conducting a closure plan for the bridges and procured equipment and materials, as well as signage, barricades, and fencing for pedestrian safety. During this time, more inspections will be conducted on the bridges, McMillan noted. In response to a question from Deputy Mayor Ian Langley about the need to reroute traffic, which will put pressure on other streets, and another question from Town Councillor Todd Barrett about the need for a barricade around Prince Street, the Public Works Director noted that barricades and advanced signage were erected on Reeves Street, Granville Street, and the intersection of Granville and Prince Streets. After McMillan said traffic is being diverted to nearby streets, Town Councillor Paula Hart expressed concerns with increased traffic flow and speeding around McLaughlin Drive. McMillan said all stakeholders have been involved, including emergency services like the Port Hawkesbury Volunteer Fire Department, EHS, and the RCMP. McMillan expects an increased police presence during these closures.
The timelines on the work being done. Do you guys know how long that might take once you guys do find a person to do construction?
So there's a process that will follow through. So we have preliminary findings from an inspection. The findings were very serious, so we had to act on them right away. But that complete investigation has to occur yet. So, and that requires some destructive work. So tearing apart some of the bridge to find out what's wrong with it. So we have to finish that investigative side. Then we'll go through, once we find out what's wrong, then we have to go through a design process. The design process will give us tender documents. We'll go out through tender, we'll evaluate tenders, and then award tenders. So there's a significant amount of time that's has to be put forth. Until we finish the investigative work and look at the scope of work, we won't really know how long we'll be down, but it will be for a significant amount of time that the bridges will be closed.
Not to hypothesize, but do you foresee it going into the winter, maybe, or?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, who is carrying out the work that's being done starting on Thursday? Terry, what is the company involved?
So WSP Consulting is they're the structural engineers, they're bridge experts. And they've been carrying out bridge inspections for us for the last, I think, 4 years. So this is their second round of bridge inspections. One of the things they've noticed was the change from the inspection in 2024 and the inspection this year, or 2023 and the inspection this year. Significant change in it's called a pile cap. It's a large carrying beam under the bridge that was deteriorating more quickly than it should have. So that's really what spurred on the initial immediate reaction that we took.
Now, you said there was an issue that was identified with the bridge. What's the specific issue we're talking about in regards to the bridge?
Well, there's a number of issues on both bridges, but the most significant issue was with respect to, it's called a pile cap. It's a large timber beam that sits on top of timber piles, and that carries the load of the bridge onto the piles and then to the earth. So there's some rot and distortion around this beam, specifically on one side, and that's the side that's used primarily the most on that one bridge. So that was the initial concern that brought the immediate attention.
Out of curiosity, Terry, any idea when these bridges were first constructed, how old they are?
I'm not certain. I have, we don't have record of that. And I have reached out to some local folks that I thought might know. And I haven't found out that answer, but they're very old. I mean, we're looking certainly pre-60s, 1960s. So they've been there for quite some time.
Curious, Terry, has there been any assertion as to what's been causing? You mentioned rot on the bridge and obviously other areas of safety concerns. Is heavy traffic attributed to that? Trucks being diverted off Reeve Street and going along Granville Street? Are there any handful of things other than age, which you mentioned earlier, that are leading to these issues with the bridge?
No, we're not really certain what caused that damage, but there is significant use on the bridge, and there is a 20-ton limit imposed on the bridge. We don't necessarily police that to a large extent, so there could be some overloading off the bridges as well. But we're not certain on that. But that member did deteriorate more quickly than we had expected.
Another point raised by Langley was the price tag to repair the bridge, with Town Councillor Blaine Macquarie calling it an enormous cost. Doyle estimated work to the two-lane bridge would cost around $5 million, which would be difficult for the town to finance. The CEO said there are no programs in place for bridge repairs or replacement, but town staff will continue lobbying and reach out to Inverness MLA Kyle Macquarie. The deputy mayor also noted that the timber bridge is owned by Nova Scotia Public Works, and Doyle responded that the town has been in communication with the regional manager, who has been extremely helpful.
Now, you said work had taken place on the timber bridge, but you couldn't quite remember. Are you able to remember approximately when that work did take place?
I think we're referring to the question from Deputy Mayor Langley, he was referring to the bridge on Reeve Street, which is owned by Nova Scotia Public Works. And there was remediation work done on that timber bridge. I'm not certain of the date that had occurred, but they did some, I don't know if it's necessarily similar work, but they've done some work to structure as well.
What are your thoughts about what you saw tonight and the town's preparedness for this work to happen?
Well, I think through routine inspections, they discovered something that totally not unexpected, given the construction material of the bridge, given the age of the bridge. Routine inspections were done to ensure the integrity is there for the load rating that has been assigned. The inspections found that there's some deformation in the integrity. The structural integrity is weakened. It's compromised to some degree, and that we're making the appropriate precautions. We're closing the bridge for repair. The bridge is being closed in a controlled manner. Proper signage, barricades are being procured, and you'll see the bridge closed later this week for upgrades.
Now, I just want to get a sense, I may have missed it talking to the Public Works Director. Is it designed that this will all happen within a certain day of Thursday, October the 9th, or is that just when it's about to start and we don't know the closure date yet?
The time of day, I don't know, but the projected date is the 9th.
So I assume you're satisfied overall with the plan, the emergency plans, and all the work that went into closing this bridge?
I am satisfied. There'll be a further engineering study to see what repairs are required. There'll be a procurement process that's put in place that's appropriate for the repairs. The tendering process will proceed after the engineering work is done, and we'll be looking for the most cost-effective measure to put that asset back into service.
Now, the CAO had said that early investigations by the town as to whether provincial funding could come forward on this didn't turn up anything, but the town has approved a motion to reach out to the MLA, Kyle Macquarie. Your thoughts on whether the province could be brought on board for future bridge repairs, or just where we go from here?
We don't know unless we'll try. And we're going to try. We'll try to get that bridge back in service at the most cost-effective way for our citizens as possible. And that includes all avenues, any avenue, provincial or federal.
The town of Port Hawkesbury is applying for funding under the Federal Climate Risk Assessment Program. CEO Terry Doyle had a motion approved to apply to the local leadership for Climate Adaptation Fund and the Climate Ready Plans and Processes program through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
The application you're making to the climate risk assessment program, what does that entail as far as local projects?
It's really, it's what it says. So it's an assessment first. So we look at we define the risk within the boundaries of the town of Port Hawkesbury. And we look at those areas that require the most attention, those that we should be planning for. And it's a 3-year program, actually. So we're looking at the sort of final stages of that around help in looking at funding avenues for once the risks are identified and the scopes of work are identified. So it's a fairly extensive program that we're applying for through the federal government.
The bridge work totally not possible to be covered by the climate risk assessment program, or is that a possibility?
I do not believe so. That's something that we have discussed before, if there is an avenue through that, because it is susceptible to climate change, certainly the structure. But that's something we can explore, but there's not a direct path through that funding program.
Any particular aspects of life in the town that could be targeted in a climate change assessment such as this? I mean, obviously, you look at the waterfront, recent events like Fiona and the dry summer that we've had here, wildfires in the Annapolis Valley. Is there any 1 or 2 things that you can think of when you look at a program like this and says this is a perfect fit for Port Hawkesbury? Or is it just general preparedness?
I think there's general preparedness, but I mean, we're all thinking about drought right now because we just went through a summer of drought. Previous summer, we had a summer of flooding. So we had 2 major back-to-back floods within the town of Port Hawkesbury that overwhelmed our storm sewer system. So utilities is one thing that we look at, and susceptibility to climate change as a result of that. But really, we want to take this. We want to go in with an open mind and assess the risk, identify the issues, and assess the risk. Once that piece is done, then we look at other avenues to repair those. This is one of 2 programs that we're already enrolled in another climate change program as well as doing our own study. So we're doing a study in cooperation in partnership with the municipality of the County of Inverness on our water and storm sewer systems. So that information will all fold in. So we're trying to gather we're looking at as many opportunities as we can to be prepared for the future.
Any progress you can report on that particular study with Inverness County on water and sewer?
Yeah, so the request for proposal is either nearing completion or is on the street. I'm not 100% sure, but it is progressing quite well.
The latest names to be placed on Port Hawkesbury Sports Wall of Fame were announced. Port Hawkesbury Town Councillor Todd Barrett confirmed that former Town Councillor Huey McDougall, a former baseball player and coach, Marcy McNeil, a volleyball player for Sarek and Team Nova Scotia, former Sarek basketball player the late Trish Little, and youth nominees Chad Richards and Ella Bartlett will be placed on the wall in an upcoming ceremony. In announcing the names, Barrett noted that McDougall passed along his knowledge to younger generations. McNeil was a standout player, and a tournament has been named after Little. Attending the meeting virtually, Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton added thanks to the nominating committee for the many hours they spent discussing the nominees, then letting them know about the honor.
The nominations for the Sports Wall of Fame, what's your reaction to the names that came forward or were given tonight?
I think they're all deserving, not just for their athletic prowess, but for their giving of time by way of coaching to the community. There's one award that's being awarded posthumously. That recipient is
Tricia Little, isn't it?
It is. And not only was she a good basketball player, she was an equestrian. She had, I think, 4 children, or I forget the family size.
Yeah.
She encouraged their athleticism. And it's not surprising that she had all that ability. Her grandfather was Tiger Mackey. Wonderful family, gave so much to their community by way of sport.
Town Council voted to maintain its Halloween curfew. As a result, trick-or-treating will be permitted until 8 p.m. Masks cannot be worn after 8 p.m. And there's a 10 p.m. curfew for those ages 16 and under.
Now, the Halloween curfew, you guys have been keeping these hours for quite some time now. Why do you think it's important to maintain this? Is it because it's worked and Halloweens have been relatively quiet for quite some time?
It's a public safety issue. It's children involved. It's nighttime. They're knocking on strangers' doors. Why wouldn't we have it? We've had it before. I remember many years ago there was even a whistle for a curfew in the evening. So this is not new. I think it's appropriate from a public safety perspective.
The contributions of volunteers in Nova Scotia were celebrated at the 51st Annual Provincial Volunteer Award Ceremony in Halifax on September 29th. Among those honored were Charlie Martel from the municipality of the County of Richmond. Through his generosity, leadership, and vision, Martel donated his time and supplies to help support a community initiative that brought together numerous volunteer efforts in Richmond County. On December 29th, 2024, a longtime Lordways community member lost their home to a devastating fire. Without hesitation, Martel stepped forward, offering support to help rebuild. His efforts inspired local contractors, community members, and business owners to come together to make this new home a reality. Francis Xavier Doucette represented Budladek First Nation. More than 40 years ago, Doucette joined the volunteer fire department, and in 2008, he was trained to be a medical first responder for the community. After serving as a cadet in his youth, he helped with the Army Cadets when his son joined in 2005. Doucette's passion for helping his community was instilled by his parents at an early age, including chaperoning community trips to events, dressing up as Santa Claus during the holiday season, and taking kids salmon fishing with his wife on the Margaree River. At the annual Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Summer Games, Doucette volunteers his time making sure things were set up and giving out shirts and pins to community members. He served as the bingo caller for the many fundraising events held for school trips. In 2015, Doucette took on the mantle of one of Budladek's representatives on the Grand Council of Mi'kmaq. Annie Beaton of the town of Port Hawkesbury has been involved in many committees, including Festival of the Strait, Celtic Colours, the Terry Fox Run, the Tall Ships Festival, the Strait Pirates Junior B Hockey Club, and many more. Beaton is a driving force behind the Tiger Mackey Old Timers Hockey Tournament, paying special attention to the Trish Little division. On many occasions, she helped various individuals and projects, events, fundraisers, sporting tournaments, and more by attending, buying raffle tickets, and helping to promote them. Awards were presented in 4 categories: the Newcomer Volunteer Award for a newcomer who has demonstrated extraordinary outreach to and volunteerism in their new community; the Youth Volunteer Award for a volunteer aged 13 to 24; the Family Volunteer Award for a family of 2 or more people living in the same community; and the Nova Scotia Strong Award, recognizing resilience during a time of tragedy or struggle. The Nova Scotia Strong Award went to Blaise Sampson, who has served with the St. Peters and District Volunteer Fire Department for 35 years as a firefighter and first responder. Sampson's loyalty and dedication to the community have never wavered. Known for his kindness and compassion, Sampson's ability to stay calm and professional in crises has made him a trusted first responder. His care was especially evident during a recent family emergency, where his thoughtful response left a lasting impact. Beyond emergency calls, Sampson supports his community in countless ways. He frequently attends fundraising events, freely donates his carpentry skills, and offers help wherever it's needed. Along with the provincial awards, each municipality and Mi'kmaq community selected a representative to receive an individual Volunteer of the Year award, recognizing outstanding service at the community level. Award recipients are selected by a citizens selection committee. Joining me is the Leader of Nova Scotia's official opposition. Welcome back, NDP Leader Claudia Chender.
Thanks for having me.
The fall sitting of the Nova Scotia Legislature is concluded, and your party is charging that nothing was done to lower bills or housing costs. So what should have been done in this session?
Well, we should be talking about the things that Nova Scotians care about and are concerned about, and what Nova Scotians are overwhelmingly concerned about, and this is from conversations, from polling, from everything, is affordability. And the thing that's most expensive, that is the same thing that's been most expensive for years, which is housing. And so we put forward a number of proposals to actually talk about that. How do we have homes that people can afford? How do we help people stay in the homes they're already in? And in all those areas, actually, this government's been making it harder. So they kicked 46,000 people off of the heating assistance rebate program by changing the standards. In communities that have a lot of rental housing, there's no protection for renters because there's a loophole. So the rents go up and up and up year after year. And we're not really seeing the kind of housing people can afford at the scale that they need it. So we see little patches of building going on, but most young folks are not at all feeling like they can afford a future where they're going to own a home or be able to do that and live the kind of life that their parents did. So these are all things that we think Nova Scotians have to be talking about. They want us to be talking about. We're bringing proposals. And instead, we were in the legislature in Halifax for 8 days. The premier was there for 6 of them. He went to a soccer game instead of signing his legislation at the end. And I think it's really disrespectful to Nova Scotians who are looking for solutions and counting on a government to deliver them.
On the subject of power bills in Nova Scotia Power, your party
Mm.
introduced legislation back in February, as I'm sure you're aware. One consisted of regulatory changes. Now,
Yeah.
when you talk about that, what exactly does that entail?
Well, there's a number of different changes that could happen. A lot of those were because of the data breach. So as you know, most Nova Scotians were exposed to this massive data breach where your social insurance number and who knows what else was stolen. We think Nova Scotians need to be better protected. And one of the things we learned from that data breach was how little protection we actually have. So there's just a big gap out there. Government hasn't really caught up to the new reality of this kind of digital crime. So this would really help people ask for a credit freeze if they need it, make sure that companies don't keep their social insurance number if they already have them, and make sure that they could be held accountable. So right now, if you suffer identity theft and you get a bunch of money stolen, you actually can't sue the government. I mean, you can't sue the company for that. And we think you should be able to. So that was that. But I think more to what we're hearing today from people is we put forward a proposal to give people a 10% rebate on their bills, because right now people just can't afford that bill a lot of the time. And we've had this push for years to get a heat pump and to get off of oil and to be more efficient, and that efficiency is really important. But if electricity is going to get more and more expensive, then our bills are going to continue to go up. And so we think that Nova Scotians need that rebate. That's what they've told us. And again, really just crickets from the government on this.
Now, the legislation you introduced last winter also talked about a low income rate. How would you accomplish that? I assume there's going to be like an income threshold that would apply there.
Yeah, so that exists in lots of other places. Ontario has something like that. And there's actually this is something people have been pushing for decades. There's a task force about it. The government sits on that task force. But yeah, it's really to make sure that everyone can keep the heat and the lights on. So income tested, all of that, but just making sure that nobody has to go without power. Because right now, the way that the legislation works, it prevents a low income energy rate from being established. Even if the company wants to do it, even if the government wants to do it, actually the law has to change to allow that to happen. And we've been trying to change that law for a long time, and we're going to continue to.
And also, as part of that same legislation that was introduced in February, you guys proposed a utility ownership study. What exactly is that?
Well, I think what we know is that in 1992, the Conservative government sold Nova Scotia Power. There was no economic analysis. There was no study of whether that was the best thing for Nova Scotians. But ideologically at the time, I think they thought, well, if we privatize it, it'll be more efficient, it'll be more effective, it'll be more affordable. And right now, I don't think anyone would say that Nova Scotia is delivering efficient, effective, affordable power. And so that begs the question, like, is this the right structure for Nova Scotians? Because we know their shareholders are doing really well, but Nova Scotians aren't. And so a lot of people have come to us and said, well, we should privatize the company. And we don't want to make the same mistake the Conservatives made. We're not going to go ahead and push in that direction unless we know it's the right direction for Nova Scotians. And so what we've suggested is we do that analysis. Because there are a lot of other provincially owned utilities across the country. Not everybody followed the suit of the Nova Scotia government. Let's look at those. Let's see, does that deliver a better, more effective, more affordable service for Nova Scotians? And then if the answer is yes, I think it's something we have to talk about.
What is your take on the $1.2 billion deficit that the government has confirmed?
Well, I think it's, connected to everything we're talking about. Like if this government has spent that much money, we should have something to show for it. And instead, housing has gotten more expensive by a long shot. It's now as expensive, it's as expensive to live and commute in Halifax, but in lots of communities in Nova Scotia as it is in Toronto. Like it's out of control, right? We have no real improvement in transit anywhere, whether that's on the mainland, on the island, or points in between. We have a long way to go on transit. Power is more expensive. People are still waiting to have access to healthcare. So where did the money go? It would be one thing if we saw a big deficit and we saw real improvements in any of the things I just mentioned, which are the things that people are talking to us about. But we've got a problem if we have a government that is going into significant deficit and we have Nova Scotians who are paying more and more for things each month.
Now, your party also said it wants to make housing more affordable and available to more Nova Scotians.
Yeah.
How would your party propose to do that?
There's lots of ways to do that. So one is rent control, which we talked about. Like we think that, renters need protection so they can stay in their homes. And, sure, this impacts seniors. It impacts everybody, families. But then we also need to make sure that we are building the homes that we need and that we're prioritizing building the homes that are affordable. So we know that there's lots of great examples right across the province of really great nonprofits and others who are building that kind of affordable housing. We have a history of co-op housing. There's been some small announcements about public housing, but the reality is like we need a ton more housing, not just shiny towers in the cities, but places that people can actually get into and stay in. And so we really need to focus on that. So we've brought lots of legislation that would enable that. The most recent was to kind of set a target of the number of houses we want and to have an independent housing officer that can make sure we're getting that done. And we're not just the Premier's office isn't doing the deals that are the lowest hanging fruit, but making sure that we're doing things that really impact Nova Scotians.
Now, you referred to this earlier about the 8-day legislative session, and your party said it's the shortest fall session since 1986. Do you believe moves like this, and coupled with some of the other things that were done in the spring, undermine democracy in Nova Scotia?
Absolutely. I just got off the phone with someone and was talking to them about the golf course proposal at West Mabou Beach. And I said, well, what can we do? And she said, well, you can just push for accountability and transparency. And I said, well, that's a big hill to climb right now, because this is a government that has, been very clear that those are not priorities. And it's disappointing because these are the things that Tim Houston campaigned on. Like they did. I was there. He wanted more accountability. He wanted more transparency. And we should all want that. We should want that for our constituents because Nova Scotians deserve that. We're spending their money. We're making decisions that impact their lives. But unfortunately, things like showing up to the legislature for 6 days, like being at a soccer game when we're voting on the most important legislation that you've passed, big omnibus bills, so big pieces of legislation that have 7 different things all lumped into one. It diminishes our democracy. It really does. And I guess their argument is that they're doing it in service of something, but whatever that is, we're not seeing it. So, I think it's absolutely time for people to demand more of that from their MLAs and from their government. and we're at the front of the line making those demands.
The NDP criticized the Houston government for cutting hundreds of dollars from folks counting on the home heating rebate program you alluded to earlier and kicking off 46,000 people from the program entirely.
Yeah.
What have you been hearing from Nova Scotians about the changes to this program?
Well, one of the things about having an 8-day sitting is that people just start to notice that you're there talking about stuff and then you're done. And that's by design, I think. You know, this is very much the government getting in and out as quickly as possible. We had no control over that timeline. And so now that we're gone, people are finally discovering that this happened. Of course, this change happened quietly on a Friday. It was not, you know, widely announced. So in my MLA office, and I suspect in MLA offices right across the province, people are suddenly realizing that they're not eligible for the benefits that they thought they were. And they're concerned about how they're going to make it through the winter.
Now, according to Nova Scotia NDP Freedom of Information request, the waitlist for public housing in Nova Scotia reached over 8,000 people in June. The waitlist grew by 1,200 people in just 8 months as rents have continued to grow faster than the government's temporary rent cap, your party noted. Since the Houston government took office in 2021, the public housing waitlist has increased by nearly 40%, the NDP noted. The changes that are required, aren't these going to require some fairly large fiscal financial investment from the government in order to make them happen? Or, you know, in addition to the regulatory changes you're calling for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that list is just evidence of how few people can afford housing. I don't think it's actually about that number of people want to live in public housing or even should. It's that there are no other options. And so that's why we're so focused on building affordable housing supply across the spectrum. So some of that'll be public housing. Some of that'll be nonprofit or co-op housing that's, you know, affordable for way more people. And then some of that'll be the middle. And I think that's what we need to take care of that list. So I think what that list is just like an alarm bell, basically saying, look how many people can't afford housing at all. Because like, I know in my office, like if someone comes to see me and they're like, I can't afford my rent, I'm being evicted, or I have to move and I can't find anything. Well, one of the first things we try to do is put them on that list. Because if they can get to the front of that line, at least we know they'll have safe, stable housing. But it's just evidence of how much housing we need.
Now, the NDP issued a press release recently asserting that skilled tradespeople deserve fair overtime laws and better working conditions. How is it that Nova Scotia's overtime laws are what your party called outdated and working conditions are what your party also called poor?
Well, I think it's just it is what it is. Our labor standards code has not been updated to reflect the current reality. And, you know, there was a time when it felt acceptable for people not to get overtime until long after they would have been eligible in other professions, as, you know, impacts certain professions. There was a time when, you know, the labor market was loose enough, I should say, that you could get paid way less for your overtime. And that might be okay because you weren't going to worry about if you could pay your bills at the end of the month. That's not okay anymore. People deserve fair pay for the work that they do. And in Nova Scotia, compared to other places, they're not getting it.
Now, beyond this sitting of the legislature, which is concluded, what are your plans for the upcoming weeks and months as leader and for the party itself?
Well, I'm going to do what I always do, which is kind of crisscross the province. So in the next few weeks, we'll be down in Southwest. We'll get, you know, to Annapolis and Digby area. We'll be in Sydney. We'll do a stop in Port Hawkesbury. We'll be in Tadmagush, and probably a lot more places. Those are the ones off the top of my head. But just, you know, connecting with people, figuring out, you know, what's going on. We've had a lot of really successful town halls through the summer and fall, and we'll continue that. And just making sure that, you know, even if the government doesn't want to listen to and consult with people, that we're there to hear their concerns, to share our plans, and to work with them to build a province that we can all really be proud of and where everyone has a good shot.
The town of Port Hawkesbury will be unveiling a memorial in a ceremony taking place later this month. In a press release issued on October 1st, the town said the monument will pay tribute to Austin Letcher Sr., a dedicated game warden who served for over 20 years and lost his life in the line of duty on October 8, 1967. The town said the memorial will be located in a prominent and accessible section of the active transportation trail, offering a meaningful place for residents and visitors to pause, reflect, and recognize the sacrifice of an individual who committed his life to protecting Nova Scotia's natural resources and wildlife. Austin Letcher Sr. was more than a conservation officer. He was a protector of the land, a respected public servant, and a member of our extended community whose dedication continues to inspire, said Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm Beaton. We felt it was important to create a public space that honors his memory in a way that's both visible and connected to the natural world he worked so hard to protect, the mayor said. The monument's location was thoughtfully selected to ensure year-round accessibility and to integrate the tribute into one of Port Hawkesbury's most well-used community spaces, the town said, noting that the active transportation trail, which encourages outdoor recreation and appreciation of the environment, reflects the values that Letcher upheld throughout his career. The town said it is working closely with members of the family to ensure the monument is both respectful and representative of Letcher's enduring legacy. The town is inviting residents to join in the unveiling of the monument on Saturday, October 18th at 11 a.m. on the active transportation trail by the water fountain. With me is the interim leader of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party. Welcome back, Derek Mumbercat.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jake. Appreciate it.
So your party called the recent fall sitting of the Nova Scotia Legislature a short session. Your party claimed that the governing Progressive Conservatives relied on omnibus bills that bundled unrelated issues together, using its majority to push them through with limited debate and little accountability to Nova Scotians. What exactly are you talking about there?
Well, the last session was one of the shortest in history. We saw a session that lasted 8 days. The premier was absent for multiple days throughout it. And what we saw the government come forward with were these omnibus bills that, for folks, these are bills that lump a whole number of topics and a whole number of decisions and into one bill, which aren't consistent with one another. So we saw this, and the reason the government does it is because it allows them to push many pieces of legislation through at once. It limits debate where these bills should be separated out and treated as bills independent to express the importance of each piece of it. It's a concern for us because when this happens, it does stifle public input. So there's the public bills process where people come in, but they're coming in on various aspects of an omnibus bill that limits the amount of time that is used for public input. If they were separated out into individual pieces, it would give people an opportunity to come in with more time into the public bills process. So, very disappointing, but it's not something new. Like, we've seen this trend in the last number of sessions with this government, and it's not a good way to govern. And it's definitely not a good way to allow for public input.
What is your take on the provincial government's $1.2 billion deficit?
Well, it's very concerning. I don't see a path forward where the government is going to address it. It is historic for this province. The concern being that it does impact programs and services. It impacts the future decision-making of the government and the programs that families and organizations would use every day. We saw towards the end of this session that the government pulled back on the heating rebate program. That was a program that was used heavily and still is. A lot of families depended on it, especially at a time when we're seeing increases in power rates. We're seeing cost of living become a very difficult journey for some people. And now this program has been scaled back to $400, and also the threshold has been scaled back to $30,000. So this is what happens when you lose control of the finances. The government is going to need to look at how they operate, and unfortunately, what you see is a program like this that many people would access won't be able to access it anymore.
What are you hearing from Nova Scotians about the changes to the heating rebate assistance
Well,
program?
it's a concern because a lot of people that qualified before won't, and people are really concerned about making ends meet. We're looking at another increase in power rates here in the province. The cost of living isn't going down. People are really struggling to make ends meet, and people are upset. They're upset at the government for cutting back on this program, and as I said, what's next? This is a classic case of a government losing control of the books, and now they're going to have to scale back. And these programs are ones that shouldn't be scaled back. There's many other aspects of government that they should be looking at when it comes to a review of how they operate. But people are really concerned. People are really upset.
Now, another major theme of the fall sitting for your party was the introducing legislation to ease the burden of rising Nova Scotia power rates. Do you see these power rates as a major problem facing Nova Scotians right now?
Oh, power rates are a major problem facing Nova Scotians, and we tabled legislation throughout the sitting and talked about the concerns that we hear across the province from people who have concerns around Nova Scotia Power at this point, people's information that has been compromised as a result of the cyber breach. A lot of concern around why people's social insurance numbers were being stored. There needs to be more accountability from Nova Scotia Power, and there needs to be ways that we can step up to help Nova Scotians reduce their power bills and help them, reduce the amount of energy that they consume by supporting them with programs that matter and that work that families can utilize every day.
Now, another issue your party pointed to are families struggling to build a life. As you see what is taking place in the province as undermining affordability, you just noticed power rates, but what else is taking place that's eroding that?
Well, power rates, of course, you're looking at the cost of living overall, really, the price of food, that's a problem. The cost of rent is a huge problem. We've seen rent increase really right across the province. So there's a number of aspects that impact families when they make decisions and they want to support their children. So, we're seeing poverty rates way up. We're seeing rent way up. We're seeing power rates going up. And as a legislature and as representatives, we want to be doing whatever we can to help support families, be strong and be able to live and succeed happily in our communities.
One of the things you pointed to was make childcare more affordable. How exactly would your party do that?
So I was involved heavily with the national childcare deal that was signed back in 2021. So that was a huge piece of it for us. That would bring childcare fees down to an average of $10 a day by next year. We continue to advocate for that. The current government just renewed that program for the next 5 years. So that's key. Now the childcare piece. As well, we were big advocates for the breakfast program. We designed it and implemented it in our time in government, and we started the foundations and really the debate around a lunch program for kids. So that in our schools, so all of that plays a part in helping to support families with the cost of living. We're going to continue to advocate for more supports when it comes to childcare, when it comes to, looking at after school programs. I have a lot of conversations around special after school programs to reflect support for all students within our school system. So we'll continue to advocate for that stuff. But childcare is a big part of it. We were very proud to work closely with the advocates within the province to implement that program starting out and hold the government to account to the fact that that was a strong program that was celebrated across the province, and by next year there should be average $10 a day childcare across Nova Scotia.
Now, how is it that the Nova Scotia Liberal Party would fight or make steps towards making healthcare more accessible, as you noted in some recent press releases?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of aspects with that. some that we've talked about. When you look at access to primary care, we're watching closely. The government comes out and says they've reduced the need of family practice wait list, but they won't release the information. So, we want to see how accurate that information is. Of course, we want people to get a doctor. That's first and foremost for their families. So that's a part of it. Looking at other ways that we can help to recruit newcomers to come to Nova Scotia to practice, whether it's in general practice or specialty. And one thing I'm talking to folks about is the actual the time it takes to be certified. That's key too as well. So, we implemented a number of things when we were in government to help attract people to come to Nova Scotia. This government is doing. They've implemented some things too as well. Some of the things that we would support around the medical school at Cape Breton University. I think that's excellent. But in talking to people, I think one of the big challenges is going to be that point of when somebody wants to come here and they have to go through the licensing and the tests and whatever. How can we look at ways that we can speed up that process? Because I know there are people within our communities now that are going through it, and it takes a lot. It takes some time. So the more barriers we can break down, the better to get people to come here because they want to be here.
How is it that businesses in Nova Scotia are finding it harder to succeed, is what your party is asserting?
So what we're seeing right now and what we're watching is some trends around population. We're looking at what the future holds for businesses here across the island and across province for that matter. We hear stories around they want red tape reduced. They want the ability to expand the products that they have, and we're watching very closely around the concept that the Prime Minister and governments around Canada are talking about when it comes down to breaking down interprovincial trade barriers. We've tabled our own legislation on that too as well, where if you have the ability to open up markets to our products being able to be sold across the region or across the country for that matter, it helps. So it's we hear from businesses that the economy is shaky at times. Like we're watching the economy very closely here in the province. As the Premier has indicated, we're the lowest in North America when it comes right now to GDP. We're the lowest. It's a concern for us. So we're going to keep advocating to help support businesses. But I think the biggest thing is we got to do whatever we can to, as people in our communities too as well, to everyone, shop local. The more that we can buy local, the more we can buy Canadian, the more it's going to help our economy and help our businesses.
Now, the Liberals charged it in the previous session to the fall sitting. The government used the supermajority to attempt to fire the Auditor General, block the media, limit opposition, and threaten the job security of public servants. Do you believe that the government is still intent on undermining democracy, or do you believe that they've pulled back from some of those tendencies and are trying to be a little more moderate on that?
Well, I think undermining democracy is key because we just went through a session that was 8 days long. We went through a session that had multiple omnibus bills that really had pieces within them that didn't coincide with one another. The government does not want to be in the legislature. Obviously, we're seeing this trend stronger and stronger with the government. To have an 8-day session when you and I are having a conversation around the impact that power rates are having on people, the impact of cost of living are having on people, the impact of healthcare, the concerns that I hear around the provinces around ER closures and the stories around doctor recruitment and how the government is not releasing the information anymore that they used so readily to win government. The undermining of democracy is it's a very serious thing. We're elected to be in the legislature. We represent our communities and we do whatever we can on a daily basis to help the people that we represent and beyond. But our job is to be legislators. Our job is to be in there debating the issues that matter, formulating solid policy to support people each and every day, support businesses, support the growth of our province. And the government just doesn't want to be there. They see it as a barrier. They don't want to answer any questions. And to your point, you look at the last session. They tried to fire the Auditor General without cause. They still passed the legislation around the public service, which is, I can tell you, morale from the people I've talked to within the public service, morale is at an all-time low. You're essentially telling people that they're disposable at any time. And, you know, they literally sent a letter out to Nova Scotians asking for support for their party and support to block the media. So conversations that I'm having with you right now, they don't want. They specifically said, help us. Help us to bypass the media. That was the language that they used. So I think they pulled back because they realized that Nova Scotians don't accept the fact that they should be doing some of those decisions. Nova Scotians respect our democratic process, and Nova Scotians think that we should be in the legislature. They think we should be in there talking about the important issues and coming forward, not against one another as political parties, but as legislators who have the privilege of serving our communities and the privilege of having a seat in that legislature. To be there as long as we were this session is really disgraceful.
Now, you criticize the provincial government for changing the way in which highway contracts are awarded. What are your specific issues with this decision?
Well, so the 80-20 rule has been in place for years, and the rule around the fact that it was meant to be a level playing field. It gave a lot of local contractors across the province the ability to partake in some of the major construction projects that were taking place, roadwork, et cetera. And we have some major concerns around it. So did many of the businesses around Nova Scotia. We haven't figured out what the final result is going to be on it yet, but the government came out with a letter in the summer. They sent it to the association. They were unaware that there was a plan to change the 80-20 rule. So for us, we're advocating on behalf of those businesses who are very concerned right now, who've had contracts and they're buying equipment and they're making decisions as businesses to invest. And now many of them have pulled back or they don't know what to do because of the uncertainty. So we wait to see. The government has indicated that they're going to work closely with the communities and that there shouldn't be much change and there could be more opportunity, but we haven't seen the details yet. And as I said, they sent out a letter in the summer months saying that the 80-20 rule was going to be removed at the end of the year and never answered any questions. So big concern for us.
Now, early in September, the Liberals, your party wrote Prime Minister Mark Carney to express concerns with the lack of progress on energy transmission in Nova Scotia. What would you like to see the federal government do? And do you believe there's an appetite on their part to get some of these things done?
Well, I think there is. I think that energy transmission is key. And you hear a lot of conversation around what the Premier calls Wind West. Wind West is nothing new. Wind West is the concept of being able to produce a significant amount of energy from offshore to support not only our province but support the country. The key to offshore wind is really going to be the transmission and to have the infrastructure to be able to flow that energy across the region and across the country. So that's really kind of the key where the federal government is, and I hope they're thinking about that because we were talking about offshore wind for years when we were in government. Onshore at the time was more. There was more of an appetite for it. The cost was such that it was cheaper, and you started to see some onshore wind projects, and you'll probably see more. In the case of what the government and the Premier are talking about is really the infrastructure that was talked about a couple of years ago around what was called then the Atlantic Loop. And the Atlantic Loop, of course, was the transmission. That's key infrastructure that would be necessary for offshore wind to be successful. Now, you rewind 2 years ago, the federal government under Justin Trudeau at the time was talking to Premier Houston and the government about the Atlantic Loop and what was essential, and they had money on the table, and the Premier walked away at the time. So, what we've said is to our federal colleagues, this is something, of course, that we support. There needs to be heavy consultation with fishers for sure, because that all plays an impact and First Nations, of course, too, as well, leadership when it comes to a significant project like this. But I just hope the Premier doesn't walk away from the table this time. That's the key for me. He walked away. This conversation was happening 2 years ago, and he walked away from the table. So here we are again. I hope that they can come to a deal. The transmission is key because without new infrastructure and without the ability to flow energy, this conversation and the reality of the project can't happen.
The Department of Natural Resources announced changes to hunting regulations. Amendments to the Wildlife Act will lengthen the season for deer hunting, ensure gun safety and training remain a priority, and make it easier for families to hunt together. The province said amendments to the general wildlife regulations, bear harvesting regulations, and deer hunting regulations will reduce the minimum age to 12 from 16 for hunting deer and bear, consistent with hunting small game. It will add 11 more Sundays per year when hunting is permitted, and add 1 week to the end of the general deer hunting season annually. The new regulations came into effect on October 1st. Youth under 18 must still hunt under direct supervision of a licensed adult hunter to ensure safety and mentoring, the province said, adding that training requirements, including the hunter education course and the firearm safety course, remain mandatory. Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.